Welcome to the Well Path podcast, where we sit down with experts and entrepreneurs across fitness, nutrition, mindfulness, and spirituality, offering you an inside peek at building a business and a life that is truly aligned. I'm your host, Brooke Robbins. Let's get into it. Natalie, welcome to the Well Path podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to have you. Natalie El Khouri is the founder of SOMA and a nervous system and somatic coach. I'm so excited to have you on to talk about your journey building SOMA. And I know we're going to get into all of the juicy stuff on nervous system regulation and somatics. But before we dive into kind of the heart of it, I wanted to start with just like a brief introduction to kind of SOMA as a brand and how you got started in this world of kind of somatics and nervous system regulation.
Yeah, absolutely. So my story began 2 years ago. Essentially, I was going through a really stressful time in my personal life, and then I was hit with really intense physical symptoms. So I started to experience weight gain, and the way I noticed this is I was still doing my usual diet, training, and essentially my clothes started to not fit. And for me, that was a really big signal and problem that I knew that I just didn't feel like I was in my body. Essentially, then I started to experience bloating. So every meal I would eat, I simply would bloat. No matter how perfect my diet was, no matter how much I was training, the bloating just really felt intense in my stomach. And then I started to experience hair loss. My hair just started to keep falling out. And then cystic acne was another symptom that I experienced. And I was someone who had pretty clear skin. So the cystic acne was really, really painful. And they also lasted on my face for a while. So all these symptoms were literally my body was just screaming at me. I just felt really fatigued. I felt really stressed and I felt really disconnected from my body. And I just didn't know how to listen. And so I decided to go down the route of how am I going to heal my body? So I went to doctors, gut specialists, and essentially the doctor in the Western medicine took me down the route of saying that there's nothing wrong with you. You have inflammation, and here's some more medication that's going to help release the tension and the bloating and the inflammation. And I just knew something in my body told me that this wasn't the right answer and that I really wanted to look at how I can heal my body naturally. So that led me down the holistic route. I was introduced to a functional medicine doctor, and in my first consult, he simply looked at me and said to me, for a young 28-year-old girl, you're really tight, tense, and you're storing a lot of trauma in your body. And so from that moment, I made myself a promise that I'm going to heal myself naturally. And so I went down the route of trying to find every answer to help solve all the symptoms that I was experiencing. So I started to do acupuncture weekly. I started to do kinesiology. I started to go to naturopaths, nutritionists. I was trying every herb, every gut test. I went down the allergy test of foods, and then I started to cut out all your culprits like your gluten, your dairy, your coffee. I was really trying to find answers about how to solve my body and heal it. And essentially, it wasn't until I got told by a friend to create TikTok. I wasn't somebody who really liked being online and sitting on social media, but I decided to create a TikTok, and essentially my feed was all nervous system regulation, as that's what I was kind of interested in trying to help heal my body. And I came across a post that was a legs up on the wall where it told me that this post helped relieve bloating symptoms, inflammation, and help blood circulation. So essentially that led me down the path of lying on my living room floor with my legs up. Instead of the wall, I was using a foam roller. And essentially, I would lay down every night before bed and I'd start to move on this foam roller and just move intuitively in moves and ways that felt really good for my body. And I felt like I was releasing a lot of emotions. There were some tears, some days, and I just kept doing this every night and my body craved it. And essentially, this triggered something in me to want to study and go into the nervous system space. And as I started to do more and more digging, I realized that these exercises and moves that I was doing on the floor was somatic exercises. So that then led me into the world of studying somatics and nervous system regulation. And so basically that led me to the journey of creating SOMA through my own personal healing journey.
Wow, that is incredible. It's wild to me that the kind of origin story of the brand it's almost like you would think it would be the opposite, where like you would kind of go through the certification route and then you would kind of like learn the things. But it's incredible. I mean, this podcast is like pretty spiritual, so listeners will not be surprised. But like for me, I'm like, it's amazing. And it's also not surprising at all that you kind of intuitively downloaded exactly what your body needed. And I love that story so much because obviously it's so helpful to like look for tools and look for external like resources, but it's also such a powerful kind of indicator that your body ultimately knows what it needs if you can learn how to listen to it.
Exactly. And it was about tuning in and listening to my body. And I think the biggest realization for me during that period was, learning about nervous system and realizing actually for my entire 20s, like I was in fight and flight. Like I was someone who was always on the go, always reactive, could never sit still with myself. So going into this world like opened my lens about how I was always constantly in fight and flight and taught me ways to heal my body by looking inside myself.
Wow, I love that so much. I resonate with so many parts of that. And I do think it's like even the timing that you sort of outlined of like being kind of in your late 20s when you sort of had this like, for lack not to be able not using this in a religious way, but like this come to Jesus moment or this like aha moment of, oh my gosh, like I'm hitting a wall now is so incredibly relatable. I think that a lot of the symptoms that you described at the beginning will be resonant for a lot of our listeners. I know I experienced a variation of that, and I do think a lot of us, again, whether it's like throughout your 20s or for whatever reason, it's a very common story that I hear, like you can kind of run yourself into the ground for a period of time, but eventually like the rubber hits the road and your body kind of forces you to stop. And so when you went into sort of when you realized kind of this was actually like a body of work and the things that you were doing intuitively were part of like a larger kind of maybe a collection of movements and exercises, what did that look like for you? Was it like a course, or how did you kind of get into the world of somatics specifically from that point?
Yeah, so I decided to study online at the time. I did a nervous system regulation and holistic health course. So I'm a holistic health coach, and then that led me into specifically doing nervous system regulation and somatic healing. So learning the tools and the practices that help heal your body. And I think one point, like I kind of want to say to the audience is, going through and seeing all these practitioners, so nutritionists, naturopaths, I was kind of searching for answers externally. I was looking for answers outside my body and absolutely did those tools and practices and medication help my body in some point, shape, or form. But it also was about looking internally and finding the answers within yourself and in your body.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that so much. And it reminds me as well, it's a topic that I feel like I talk a lot about with friends and like on the podcast to an extent. But so I've experienced Soma and I have been using the program for probably like close to 20 days now. I'm like part of the way through the 30-day, and we'll get more into for anybody that's listening sort of what Soma is and how the program works. But it's this amazing program with these short videos that kind of walk you through these nervous system regulation techniques that really help. And it's just really interesting for me because I'm somebody who, and I think a lot of people might resonate with this, like in my 20s, like I didn't even like to do yoga because I felt like it was quote a waste of time because it wasn't vigorous enough exercise. And I find that like with movement, a lot of the time, less really is more. And sometimes when we're experiencing these problems, like you feel bloated, you feel like you're gaining weight and you don't understand why, the temptation is to double down and be like, okay, I'll do 2 workouts a day. Okay, I'll ramp up the cardio. And it's like we don't realize that it completely backfires. And it's actually really liberating to realize that less truly is more, and our bodies are so wise, and our bodies actually want to be like nurtured and cared for. And this is like, I love Soma so much because I feel like the videos are it really does feel like a warm hug. It's like you taking care of you. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to explain kind of like what somatics is, so the audience knows what we're kind of talking about, it's a body-based approach. And what that means is that it's about tuning into your body and it's about listening to what's happening on the inside, the signals, the sensations that you're feeling, and then gently releasing them through the somatic movements that are in the 30-day reset that release trauma, tension, emotions that are stored in the body. And the idea is that stress and trauma don't just live in the mind, they live inside the body. And when something in your life happens that's very overwhelming, what happens is that you don't get to complete the stress cycle. And so that energy gets stored in your body, it gets stored in your muscles, your tissues, and your nervous system. And where somatics comes in is it gives your body a way to release that stress and complete the stress cycle out of your body. And it's really about listening in. And this can look like taking a moment and pausing. It can look like rocking. It can look like humming. There's so many different practices that are included in the program that you've obviously experienced yourself, Brooke. That is just a simple way to release what's stored in your body.
Yeah, I love that. I'm curious, Natalie, like when you were kind of intuitively, before you kind of figured out what somatics was, but you were sort of intuitively doing this process of legs on the wall and then variations on that. Do you remember like how long it took you to sort of like see and feel results in your body?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I'd say I was doing every night these movements consistently for about 1 to 2 months when I started to see the results. So these movements would be like all hip movements. Like as women, we saw a lot of trauma in our hips, and that's known as the psoas muscle, which is the soul muscle. And it was a lot of those kind of movements, releasing movements through there. But essentially, yeah, I'd say I definitely started to see the results within 1 to 2 months.
Yeah. Okay. That's good to know. It's good to know. Like, I mean, it's pretty quick, but it's also like you have to have a little bit of patience with these things. And like, it makes sense, right? You're resetting something, things are getting released that like there's going to be like a delayed gratification element to it.
Yes, and absolutely. I think that's the biggest, lesson is that it doesn't just happen instantly. It's got to be something that, you enjoy doing, about tuning into your body. And it doesn't mean that, hey, I can just do a quick 5-minute practice and that's it. I'm going to feel regulated. I'm going to feel healed. It's about those consistent movements every day and throughout the day to bring your body back down into that safety and then feel that kind of homeostasis, rest and digest state.
One thing that I'm kind of curious about from like a somatics perspective and kind of like from a nervous system regulation perspective, one thing that I think about a lot, people that listen to the podcast know like I coach Pilates part-time. And so as an instructor, one of the things that's like occurred to me is this kind of idea of the mind muscle connection. And there's actually a lot of studies that indicate that, like, for example, so if there's a group of patients that think about flexing their bicep every day for 2 weeks, and then people that actually do bicep exercises, obviously the people actually doing the exercises are going to see like more of a muscle increase, but the placebo group is also seeing a muscle increase. In other words, like, yes, it's about the movement, but that kind of like mind to muscle connection is also very important and actually can have like a physical impact. And I'm curious from like a nervous system regulation perspective, I imagine it's like, yes, there are these moves that people are kind of walking themselves through, but like how important is sort of the mentality around it, and how do you kind of get yourself or kind of help people get into a space to actually like receive the healing energy, if you can call it
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. So to kind of explain the mind muscle, so like your body is like the doorway to your emotions. So like think about it. When you think fear, you feel fear. So you feel fear in the knot in your stomach or the tightness in your chest. Or when you're angry, you don't just think you're angry, you actually feel angry. So you feel it in your jaw, you feel it in your shoulders, your whole muscles tense in your body. So that mind muscle connection is absolutely the most important part. And the thing is that we're taught to move past and ignore these signals. Like in this day and age, we just numb ourselves. We ignore the signals that we feel in our body. And we can do this through scrolling. We can do this through eating. I definitely was someone who kind of numbed myself through eating. But the thing is that the body like never forgets. So those unprocessed emotions are stored in your body. And so mind body connection and the awareness is the most important part. So like when you notice the tension in your body, you can meet that with compassion. So it's about understanding and tuning in. So meeting that feeling in your body with compassion, and then getting into a state where you're listening to the signals in your body and the feelings in your body. And what somatics practices do is they help you tune in. They help you listen to what's happening inside your body, feeling that tightness in your chest, feeling in your stomach. And what happens is then once you understand that, you give it compassion, and then you do the movements through somatic practices to release that tension and that stored trauma emotions. And then that's when your body starts to feel safe. So that's how we move our clients through it. So it's like the awareness, then understanding what's going on inside, then releasing it through somatic practices. And that's kind of explaining like that mind body connection.
Yeah, I really love that. Thank you for breaking that down. That was actually incredibly helpful. 'Cause I think that's, yeah, it's like something that you hear a lot, but it's different to kind of understand the mechanics of why that is. And I resonate so deeply with what you said of like emotions are felt in the body, and this is why the body is like, thinking about even like physical fitness or like a connection to your body is so important. And I do think these days a lot of types of exercise tend to be very disassociative, or almost like it's easy to kind of just like leave your body, and like people make jokes about like blacking out, like during fitness classes, like you kind of just like go to another world, but it's like, well, actually, is that very helpful?
No.
you know, there's a lot of like coming home to the body that you live in.
And that's when you kind of do like, yoga and Pilates. And when they say to connect to your breath, that is a connection to your body. That's, you're a teacher yourself in Pilates. And so it's always, they try and tune you inwards, listen to your body, listen to your breath. And that's how you can listen inwards to what's happening inside.
Yeah. I don't want to take us on too much of a tangent, but one thing I would love to touch on, at least briefly, and I know, you and I have talked offline briefly, Natalie, about, and this is something I talk very openly about on the podcast, because part of my kind of inspiration to start the podcast to begin with was that I like healed from a very, very long extended pattern of disordered eating that was like, went from kind of restriction and talk about being disassociated from my body. I mean, like, I could not be more disconnected from my body during that period of time. And then moving through kind of like a period of binge eating. And I know we've talked a little bit about that. And I do think that there's probably so many different like manifestations of nervous system dysregulation. And I think disordered eating is something that just so many women in our generation deal with for so many different reasons. And I do think ultimately there's this like root, whether it's, again, no matter what the manifestation is, whether it's like restrictive eating, it's whatever, bulimia, or it's binge eating, like it's ultimately comes down to like being very disconnected and disassociated, and to some extent maybe even having like an element of disgust or disdain for your own body. And so it seems to me like this type of tool would be really helpful, at least as part of a toolkit to kind of solve for some of those issues. And I'd love if you could share, I don't know if you have any anecdotes from clients or any insight on like how somatics can actually potentially address like disordered eating or related patterns.
Yeah, absolutely. So I myself feel like I was a binge eater. So I would, feel really stressed, whether I was sad, happy, upset. I would always kind of reach for food. And for me, that was kind of like binge eating. And what happens is essentially kind of when your body is in that fight and flight state, when your adrenaline spiked and you're ready to kind of fight, flee a situation, essentially your cortisol spiking. And what happens is in the body is that you're not bringing your body back down to like that rest and digest state. And so essentially you're reaching for a tool that can help numb or like ignore the signals that are happening in your body or the stressful moment. So that's when, for example, I would reach for food, and that would help soothe my system, and that's where I would find safety. And so that was kind of like a coping mechanism that you've kind of learnt from childhood, from when you're younger, that food is safety. So essentially that's what you're going to reach for. So the way that we kind of address this with clients and myself is essentially looking at what the triggers are, what triggers you first. So understanding that whether it's, something that's happening with a partner, at home, family, work, whatever is going on in your life, seeing what's triggering you, understanding that, bringing awareness and compassion to that. And then once you're going to reach for the food or the binge eating, essentially you need to acknowledge and find what's another tool I can replace that with. So that's where I would give my clients somatic practices and tools to reach in that moment instead of going for the food. So what can I swap it out with? And so it would be all the tools like you could be shaking it out. You could just jump up, shake up and down. You can hum. You can tap your chest, activate your vagus nerve. You can stimulate different muscles and emotions in your body and release what that stored adrenaline is in your body instead of reaching for food. So it's kind of just replacing the food with a regulation tool. And that's what I teach a lot of my clients. It's about the awareness, understanding the triggers, and what can I replace reaching the food with.
Yeah, I love that so much. This has been so helpful. I feel like we have a good kind of basis now for listeners around like, okay, what is somatics? What is kind of soma generally? And I'd love to kind of just talk a little bit now about your kind of entrepreneurial journey of like starting Soma. And I know that you also like have been working full time and you come from sort of a different world. And so walk us through kind of the journey of like from working in a corporate role and sort of what you were doing, and then kind of discovering these tools, and sort of what was the inflection point for you to actually think like, okay, I'm going to create a product and launch a business, and how did that play out?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you said, I've been in corporate for 10 years of my life. I've been in marketing. And so, along the side of working in the corporate world, I have done side businesses along the way. I grew up with a family who had their own business. So, essentially, that was kind of always my inspiration. And I've done a lot of jobs on the side. So, my journey began where I started a scrunchie business. And then that turned into next was a catering company. So I love food. I come from a Lebanese culture where we love food and it's home. And so I started a catering company, was actually really successful, but I started to burn out. And so that's why I stopped it. And then I've kind of gone into drop shipping, the e-commerce world. I started two businesses that never saw the day of light. It was a red light company as well as a lunchbox. So totally random things and businesses that have been along the way. Some made it, some didn't. But essentially, like my journey and where it led me to today and where I am with Soma is I never really thought, I would land in this nervous system or somatic space. And obviously through my own healing journey, it led me to Soma. And every business that I've done, I don't see them as failures. I see them as lessons, and they're all coming into play and really helping me run Soma as it is today. And so, as you know, I didn't start Soma as on a business plan. It started on my living room floor. So everything that's led me up until this point, is just been a learning and a lesson. And I think for me, Soma feels like I'm living my purpose. It doesn't feel like work to me. It feels like I really wanted to start a business that helped women heal their bodies like I healed myself. And I think that's the greatest thing in life, when you can find that your job doesn't feel like a job and that it feels like your passion. And so that created, and that all that led me to creating Soma and where I am today.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and also for saying that, like, that you kind of also tried other businesses that like maybe never even launched. And I actually would love to dive in a little bit here, because our audience, a lot of people listen because they want to hear about like wellness topics, and then there's also a lot of people that are interested in sort of the entrepreneurial journey. And for me, it's like the journey of like understanding yourself and becoming the real you is so parallel to, I think, the entrepreneurial journey, because exactly as you're saying, I think ideally, right, the business that you're creating is ultimately an extension of you as a human being. And like, there's a reason why I believe that there's a reason why every single one of us is on planet Earth. And so if everybody can like be, even if not everybody's an entrepreneur full time, right, but it's like to be entrepreneurial and create something of value that's like you are specifically uniquely positioned to do, is a really beautiful thing. And I'd love to kind of just maybe open up a quick discussion on like, with the businesses that you started that like didn't like fully get off the ground, like what was the process for you of knowing when to pull the plug and like wind things down versus when to kind of double down? Was that like an intuitive thing, or was that more like logic driven?
Definitely think it was logic driven at the time. I don't think at the time when I had those businesses, I was very intuitive and listened to myself. I feel like when I stopped specific businesses, like for example, the catering side, I was a bit burnt out. So yes, maybe I did listen to my body at the time, but as well as it was the economy at the time. And so it was very much so decision focused as to why I stopped those businesses. So absolutely. I think that also with Soma and kind of the nervous system world and tying that into, I also think as a person who I was at the time when I had those businesses, I don't think I really believed in myself. I don't really think I had the confidence. And so as I've gone through my healing journey and worked on my nervous system, I've opened up the capacity to be able to do things that make me uncomfortable, that make me grow as a person. Whereas when I was running those businesses prior, I never really fully believed in myself. I never really had my whole self in that business. Whereas Soma's completely different. It's a very embodied business for me.
I love that. And I guess just for listeners as well, can you walk us through, I guess, first and foremost, sort of the programs that exist now on Soma that are like currently accessible? And then I'd love to hear a little bit about sort of your vision for the brand and the business as well, and how you see it growing and potentially expanding in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the moment, I have a 30-day nervous system reset program, which you've tried yourself, Brooke. Essentially, it's 30 days of different practices. So you've got neck releases, sleep exercises, you've got back, jaw massages, and essentially there's multiple different techniques in this 30 days. So you have nervous system regulation tools, you have somatic practices, you have EFT tapping, you have shaking, a sculpt class as well. And essentially all these different types of exercises, movements helps bring your body back into regulation. So that's what's included in the 30-day. And then I'm soon launching a 7-day gut reset. And the reason why and the logic behind launching the gut reset was also for myself is obviously I healed my bloating, but sometimes the bloating had come back. And essentially what I realized was it was tied to something that was stressful going on in my life. It had nothing to obviously do with the food or what I was doing with my environment and training. So I thought I'd start a program that is 7 days that helped me bring my body back into that rest and digest and feeling safe again. So that's why I launched the 7-day gut reset. But essentially where I see the vision and for Soma to go is I want it to be an online subscription and app. So I want nervous system regulation and somatics to be something that someone can grab on their phone and literally do a nervous system practice anytime, anywhere, when they're in the car, picking up the kids, at home while they're cooking, whatever it is, picking up the phone and doing a 5 to 10 minute practice, because that's where the problem is in today, in this day and age, is that we reach for regulation when we've hit boiling point, when we have the symptoms. I want it to be incorporated in your day to day so it becomes something as accessible as your Pilates, your yoga, your meditation. So I really see Soma being a online app subscription base, and I also want it to be a movement and a change in the way people look at regulation.
Yeah. I mean, even like I follow you on social and we'll call that out and link everything in show notes too. But I love all of the kind of content, just like education that you put out on the topic as well, because I do think it's something like somatics as a topic, I would say is becoming a little bit more mainstream, but it's certainly still something that probably a lot of people that are listening to this have actually never heard that word before. And this is something that's come up like when I talk to friends, is like half the time people are like, what are you saying? Is that a word? And but it is so impactful, and and I love that you said as well, like a lot of the times when we notice these symptoms physically, it's like the first thing that we go to. That's so relatable. It's like you take every allergen test and you're like, what's wrong with my fitness routine and what's wrong with my nutrition? And like maybe there is something there too that's impacting, but a lot of time it's so like mental, emotional, and like rooted in your own body and being super disconnected. But it's overlooked. It's overlooked for sure.
Exactly. And I think the biggest like lesson from that is to understand that also things that we've gone through in childhood, like childhood trauma. And when I say trauma, it doesn't mean that something like traumatic has happened, like a death or something like that. It could be little trauma, like the things that you perceived that you were growing up. And so there's little things that happen in our childhood that then impact into our adulthood, and then the patterns that we continue to reach for. And the thing is that our body is trying to protect us 24/7. Your nervous system wants to protect you. Its one job is to keep you safe. And so essentially what happens is, like, in this modern world, we're triggered all the time. Like, we're bombarded with notifications and deadlines, sitting in traffic and things like that. And essentially it's always coming back to bringing your body back into safe mode, rest and digest throughout your day as many times as you can.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up too. I think the concept of like there's so many different names for it, like inner child work or like shadow work, and kind of whatever you want to call that's the process of sort of understanding, not in like a pointing fingers or like woe is me way, but just understanding like the things that may have gone on in your childhood that created real like blueprints in your nervous system and like created triggers for you and maybe created attachment patterns. Like, I think that's really interesting. Was that something that you were exploring in tandem to kind of getting into the somatic movement, or what did that play a role as well, or where did that kind of fit into your journey? It sounds like you've done like quite a bit of a deep dive. That's why I'm asking, because the way that you talk about it, I'm like, oh, she's done like her work on this.
Yeah, so I did that through kinesiology. So it was muscle testing and kind of seeing what was going on, what was coming up in my body today, and then relating it back to a childhood moment in my 20s, or it could be even something when I was 5, 10 years old, and understanding actually what happened in that moment in time and how that's still showing up in your day to day today in your adult life. And there is a connection between it all. So yeah, I definitely did a lot of work to uncover that, and I did that specifically through kinesiology, but also to know that you don't need to go externally for that. You can also do that within yourself and through your body, and that's obviously where the somatics ties in, is that you can teach your body safety and teach your body different ways of holding the stress pattern that you usually have done since you were a kid, and changing that today through obviously somatics and nervous system regulation, which teaches your body a different way to release. So there is absolutely a whole bunch of different ways that you can explore the work that you mentioned.
Yeah, actually, it's fun. I've actually never heard of kinesiology before this conversation either, and I'm like, maybe some people haven't either. Is that sort of what it is, though? At the forefront of it, is it always related to that, connecting
Yes, it's
memories?
it's muscle testing and releasing emotions and stored events that have happened in your life from your body. And then, yeah, it's essentially like muscle testing, because your body knows, your body feels it, your body will say yes or no. And it's simple as like kind of pushing your hand down. And so, again, that's just one modality. As I mentioned, like there are so many modalities out there. You kind of got to find the right one that works for you. And so, yes, that helped me kind of release certain events, traumas, and emotions from my body, but it was still kind of in the day to day practices of somatics and nervous system regulation, that's the tool that you can implement in your day to day when you don't have to seek, external practitioners outside of your body and yourself.
Yeah, and I think there's also like there's just I think there's time for both, but there's obviously a difference between understanding the root of something and then actually changing the pattern. And this is like where a lot of people hit a wall, I think, whether it's therapy or even hypnotherapy. We've had a couple hypnotherapists on the podcast, and that was a really helpful tool for me, like in terms of my inner child. Kind of started from a hypnotherapist perspective of like uncovering certain memories and understanding where certain like triggers came from. But sometimes
Yes.
like the understanding isn't enough. It's like you
Yeah.
understand it, but that doesn't mean that you can change the pattern right away. So I think there's an element of like understanding and then like the embodiment of, okay, I want to choose a different path now.
That's exactly right. Essentially, like talk therapy definitely has its place, hypnotherapy. It helps you, as you said, understand your story, make meaning, and it builds awareness from the top down. But where somatics comes in is it's from the bottom down. Instead of your thoughts, you're working with the body. And so releasing that tension, it shifts your body physically, and then the brain follows. So that's kind of the difference between talk therapy and somatics. And I feel like what I see this day and age with wellness approaches is it's kind of all about discipline, control, the perfect diet, the perfect routine. And where like somatics comes into this is it's the complete opposite. It's not about pushing harder, it's about softening. And then that's what kind of teaches your body to come back into that homeostasis, parasympathetic state. And that's when your body can start to heal.
Wow. I really love that. That hit so hard. It's funny because the topic that I think about all the time recently is just like the concept of kind of like masculine, feminine energy. And I think that like, I mean, you and I probably are similar in this way, Natalie, is like I think a lot of women, a lot of like ambitious women live so much in their masculine energy, especially in their 20s. Cause it's like you kind of have to in order to like get ahead or like do what you want to do in your life. And it's not a bad thing, right? Masculine energy is important. And like I think there's so many like beautiful things about that and being able to flex that in certain environments. But yeah, it's interesting because there's this push and this pull. And I think that the sort of like feminine way to do things of like being more receptive and softer to your point and like less is more and kind of this like receiving energy is like it takes practice. If you're somebody who has always solved problems by like doubling down and doing more, it's like the idea of kind of backing off and doing less to see better results is like it's really challenging to actually like comprehend that. It definitely took me some time and I still struggle with it sometimes, you know.
Me too. I think that's a huge topic. I think I was definitely someone who was in my masculine energy my whole 20s. I mean, my whole life. I just always needed to get things done, always like task driven, always, overthinking, always in the mind and never in the body. And trying to find that balance between the masculine and the feminine has been something that I've obviously worked on really hard over the past 2 years. And I think the biggest thing for me was control, letting go, and things like stop rushing. I always used to rush. I always used to want to get things done fast. I was just very much living in my masculine, and finding the way into the feminine. I definitely think somatics led me there. It led me to stop. It led me to listen to my body, to tune in. But absolutely still trying to find the balance between the both, because when you're running a business, you need to be task driven. You need to get things done. But then when you need to be also in the feminine, you need to trust, you need to let go. So finding that balance is definitely always something that you've got to constantly work on.
Yeah, this is why I actually love talking to entrepreneurs specifically in wellness, because I do think like if you're really practicing what you preach, you are operating from a place of balance and to a large extent also like trusting your intuition. This is something I wanted to come back to as well, as like you mentioned that, and I relate to this, and I'm sure a lot of listeners do too, like earlier on in your life, not feeling really connected to your intuition. I'm very much someone who wouldn't have even known what my intuition was or how I could feel it, or I had a lot of decision paralysis, and then moving into a space where like you quite literally got like a psychic download, it sounds like, of like exactly kind of what your body needed. And I wonder if were there moments, was that kind of like your opening moment of like, wow, I received some sort of wisdom just by slowing down and listening to myself? Or was there something that happened previous to that that kind of like opened the door, you could say, to like your connection to your inner knowing, for lack of a better term?
Think for me going through my healing journey, I think it opened myself up spiritually, which I never really kind of was. And that was for me my faith in God. So I think that was really what led me to let go and to trust and to believe that what's meant for me will be for me. And that's really, I think, the biggest thing for me that led me to just let go and to just trust that this is my path, this is where I'm meant to go, this is what I'm supposed to do, and this is who I'm meant to be. Like I never thought I was going to be a teacher. I never thought like I would be in this space teaching this work. I was always thinking I was just kind of going to be in the corporate world, or I was going to come up with a business idea that was never really going to be like my passion, and that's just how it was supposed to be. So I think you as you said, like I didn't know anything about intuition, gut feeling, never trust that, never listened to it. If I had a stomach ache, that was just a stomach ache from something I ate, not my body signaling, hey, this doesn't feel right, something's wrong here. So the connection between intuition, somatics, listening to your body, I think they all formed into one, and that led me down the path of really trusting and letting go, and trusting that Soma, where I'm at, what's next for me, it's just going to happen, and it's just what it's meant to be.
That is so beautiful. I resonate with that a lot. And it's funny, I actually haven't recorded. So before this episode goes live, the last episode of the Self-Trust series will have gone live. I hadn't recorded it yet, but the pillar of that is actually that faith is the foundation. And I couldn't agree with you more. So I think like yeah, we can trust ourselves, but ultimately it's a proxy for trusting in a higher power. I also use the word God. People can, deduce whatever they want to deduce, but I
Absolutely.
think that it gives you so much freedom, and you get to experience life in a totally different way from that perspective. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing, and it's a totally different way of interacting with the world, right? When you're truly intuition led, it's hard to explain because it's not logical, but it's a beautiful way to live. So thank you for sharing that.
Anytime.
Amazing. Okay, before we wrap, I always like to do like a quick lightning round of just sort of few quick questions for our guests. And the first question I'd love to ask you, Natalie, is what is one non-negotiable part of your wellness routine?
Why non-negotiable is movement. And when I say movement, it can come in any shape or form. So yoga, Pilates, somatics, a walk. So for me, like when we go into the intuition and listening to your body side, if my body's not feeling well, I'm just going to go for a walk, or I'm just going to do somatics. So that intuition about knowing what kind of movement to do. But I think any kind of form or shape of just moving, releasing energy from your body, getting your blood flowing, that is absolutely my non-negotiable in my wellness routine.
I love that. On that note, I'm curious, given like you mentioned you're kind of like intuition led, do you plan your workouts in advance, or do you take it day by day based on what you're feeling?
definitely used to be somebody who followed weight training routine strictly, but ever since going on my journey and letting go and switching from high intensity to low intensity, it actually is day by day. I do like online Pilates. I like signed up to a platform. I randomly go to a yoga class, I randomly go to a Pilates class, or I go for a walk, or I go to the gym. So absolutely, all intuitively, nothing's planned down. I take it day by day.
I love that. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I've definitely been in both camps, and I'm sort of figuring out where I fall now too, because there have been periods of time where I'm like super like on a
Yes.
schedule, and it's funny because it depends also like if you're training for something, and but even with
Yeah.
that, I'm saying now even if I'm training for something, like I struggle to commit to a schedule because I'm very much like you, where I'm just like it's not for a lack of self discipline because I know that I can, but sometimes I'm like I know it's not going to serve me, so the motivation isn't there because I'm just like the it doesn't make sense.
Yes.
I'm like,
That
if my body's like fatigued, then I'm like me doing something because I told myself a week ago that I thought it was a good idea doesn't really like clock.
I also think structure has its place. Don't get me wrong. I think following a routine is absolutely great for people who, find that they will just slack off. So it definitely has their place. I think it depends in the season that you're in and the time that you're in your life.
Yeah, it's people like listening to this will kind of feel like maybe it sounds slightly hypocritical because there are things that I do believe in, and I tell people all the time, like if you're in a rut, for example, I'm like the best thing you can start doing is getting up like at 5 a.m. and working out because it's just like there. It's more like a mental thing. It's more of like how you see yourself.
Yeah.
But I totally still see that in the sense of like, but like doing something that feels good to you, not like just doing something because you think it's the thing that you're supposed to do, kind of thing.
Also, definitely the discipline side that you mentioned. I think that, if you say to yourself, I'm going to get up and train, and you don't actually do that, it's fine that you didn't do the workout, but those little promises make you trust yourself less, more and more. And if you continue to break those little promises that you make to yourself, then that's when the spiraling begins. So, absolutely, discipline, control, and all that sometimes has its place, but also listening to your body and moving in a way that feels good also has its place.
Everything's a balance. You mentioned too that like earlier on in your journey, like acupuncture was a big part of your routine. I don't know if you're still doing that. I'm in a consistent. This is also something that kind of comes in and out. I'm currently in a consistent acupuncture phase, and one of the things that I love so much about acupuncture is that even philosophically, it just like is such a reminder that everything is about balance, and being too extreme or being not extreme enough, like both have their perils, and you have to sort of always be striving to be somewhere like right in the middle, which is
Yeah,
not always.
exactly. Exactly. You fall into the seasons. Like I haven't done it for a few weeks, and I was somebody who did it consistently for a year. So yeah, you find your season when you need it, and you know when your body needs it. You know when you're feeling great, and you know when your body's not feeling that great, and that you need that extra love and support through external factors.
One thing that Jenna Zoe, who's like a big kind of thought leader in the human design space, always says that always stands out to me and I think about often is like, you can't switch yourself off to life, meaning just because something worked for you for a period of time doesn't mean it's going to work in perpetuity. And our bodies and our souls are like all fluid. And so it's like, to your point, it's like there's this element of wanting to control where it's like when you find something that works, there's this like clinging of like, I want it to work forever. And sometimes situations change, your environment changes, something inside of you changes, and like you have to adapt. And it's like you can't. So there's no going on autopilot basically in life, in any capacity, in any like facet, and that includes fitness and health and nutrition. It's like maybe you were vegan for 3 years and that felt great, but then like one day you wake up and it doesn't feel great anymore, and like you have to give yourself permission to sort of evolve. And again, like coming back to that's the importance of, I guess, being connected to your body enough to even know what it's telling you is like a huge component of that.
Yeah, big believer in going with the flow and, going through different seasons and changing. We're all evolving and changing as humans. So allowing that, not thinking that you have to stay stuck in this one structure for the rest of your life.
Mm. Yeah. One other question from the lightning round. What's one piece of advice you would leave with the audience? And it could be something that's about like wellness. It could also be something that's from an entrepreneurial perspective.
Yeah, I guess the one piece of advice I would give is to start small. Consistency beats intensity. Like it's so tempting in your wellness routine to overhaul your life at once. Think about it. I need to sign up for the gym. I need to meditate. I need to journal. I need to cut out foods. I need to have the perfect diet. But the reality with nervous system regulation is starting small, and it's about teaching like your nervous system in small doses. It's not about I need to do an hour practice every day to heal my body. That's false. It's about intuitively doing small little practices throughout your day, 2 minutes, building it up to 5 minutes. And when you continue to do those little movements and create, and that then sends signals and safety to your body, and you've learned that over time. So micro movements then compound into big shifts. So it's always about starting small and finding really a tool that works for you and that you like. It can't be something that feels forceful and that you have to do on your to-do list. It's about how can I intertwine this into my routine as a mum, as a work colleague, like whatever you are, wherever you are. It's just about in my day-to-day. It could be cooking, it could be lying on the couch, it could be watching TV, sitting at my desk. Right now, my stomach could be clenched. It's about just softening. It's just little practices, tiny movements over a consistent period of time, which will make all the massive difference.
Wow, I love that. And this is why I love your 30-day program so much, because the videos are so short and it's like you just pop it on and it's so easy to commit to because it's like 8-10 minutes, maybe like right before bed. And it's such an easy thing to loop into your routine. So on that note, Natalie, where can people find you? Where can people find Soma? How can people access the program? Give us all the details.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on TikTok. So that's where I have a bunch of free tools, free videos, and nervous system techniques that you can take 2 minutes to implement in your day to day. And you can find Soma Within on Instagram, and then somawithin.com is where you can purchase the programs, as well as I would love to offer Brooks WellPath listeners a free code. So you can get 15% off any program you sign up, and I will definitely send through the details to Brooks so she can share it with you guys.
Amazing. We will put all of that in the show notes. I highly, highly, highly recommend checking it out when you guys have time. Natalie, thank you so much for joining today. This was such a fabulous conversation, and I was so grateful to have you on.
Thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure, and I hope everyone got something out of today. Just a 2-minute practice to integrate into your day-to-day life.